Hello, everyone. Hi, welcome, welcome. Hello, thanks for being here tonight. Welcome, everyone. Hello. We still have folks coming in. Hi, everyone, welcome. Let's get started. Hello, and on behalf of the town of Davidson, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library, and Main Street Books, welcome to the third and final evening of Davidson Discusses Caste, a Read Davidson event. I'm Beth Helfrich. I'm the events manager here at Main Street Books and a lucky Read Davidson committee member. We've already heard from historian and scholar Dr. Dan Aldridge as he helped root Caste in context. And at our second event, lifelong Davidson resident Ruby Houston graciously shared her own experiences to help us better see Caste in our own community. I want to give a special thanks to Tara Cargill Ashcraft, our moderator for those events, for her expertise, her care, and her genuine commitment to learning, to racial justice, and to this community. As one who has lived all but 4 of my now 40 years in this small town, as a child and now as a parent, as both town resident and Davidson student, I am deeply rooted here. I love this town and I love my alma mater. To me, that love also means trying to see both of them with clarity and with a critical eye. An eye for recognizing the ways in which Caste has and still does built these places that I love and wrapped its tentacles around them. But also an eye for finding and following the leaders, the citizens, and the students who are working to illuminate and disentangle those tentacles, working to build a more just and equitable community. 2 of those folks are with us tonight, and it's my privilege to introduce them to you. First, our moderator. Dr. Dre Domain is an 18-year higher education leader professional specializing in student affairs and social justice education. She's currently serving as Assistant Dean of Students for Diversity and Inclusion at Davidson College. A scholar practitioner, Dr. Domain also teaches graduate courses and publishes on topics such as student leadership and activism, college student development, and critical pedagogy. The book she co-edited, Black Women in Social Justice Education, Legacies and Lessons, was published in 2019. Dr. Domain is a recognized national leader through her consulting work and leadership and equity initiatives in both academia and in the nonprofit world. A former co-chair for the Consortium of Higher Education LGBT Resource Professionals, Dr. Domain currently serves as Vice President for ACPA College Student Educators International. Welcome, Dr. Domain. And Dean Domain is joined tonight by Davidson Jr. Brandon Harris, class of 22. Originally from Annapolis, Maryland, Brandon is a Belk Scholar and Terry Fellow, majoring in philosophy and pre-medicine. When he was 16, he founded a nonprofit in Annapolis called Brandon's Coalition for Success, a mentoring program that works with youth living in public housing. And this summer, he'll actually be leading an educational trip to Puerto Rico for participants in Brandon's coalition. Brandon was recently re-elected as student government president of the student body for a second term, a really unusual feat. While managing his courses, COVID, and his presidency, Brandon is also working on an independent study with Professor Isaac Bailey called Telling Stories of the Ignored and Forgotten. He'll be sharing more about that project with us tonight. Before we get started and before we go into our first breakout room, I asked Dean Domain to share a little bit about the work that she does at Davidson College to give us some context, because part of what she does is highlight students. And so the bulk of the conversation tonight is really going to be Dean Domain asking questions of Brandon. But Dr. Domain, if you don't mind giving us a quick snapshot of what it is that you do while we build the breakout rooms, and then we'll launch into those rooms with our first question.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Beth, for having me tonight. Hello, everybody. I know it's super weird to be in this virtual world. I'm looking at little squares around my screen, but I'm super thrilled to be with all of you today. Fun fact, I'm still a new like Norman person. I moved here about 3 years ago. So just as I was connecting in the town, everything shut down. And so it's super exciting to see so many folks, both from the campus, but also in the town. And randomly, the reason how I got connected, I post a lot about the books that I read. Caste was one of them, and Ida saw that. It's like, hey, how about you talk? So that's kind of how that happened. Thing about me, I've been, as Beth mentioned, I've been in higher education for about 20 years. It was an intentional choice to come to Davidson. The reason why I kind of moved into this position is that it was an opportunity to do a lot of the work that I've been doing throughout my career. And so what that really means for me is that my primary focus is to support minoritized students, so students that are not typically represented in a dominant numerical way on campus. So that's students of color, our queer and trans students, our first generation students, our undocumented students, and I even support, in a dotted line, our international and our kind of various religious students of religious identities. That's really the heart of my work. Is my goal is to be able to provide community for our students, have ways of them connecting with each other. And a lot of the work that we do is student driven. So my student staff are the ones that put on our programming, our events, and what have you. The other part of my work, and most people don't know, and they don't get to see, is that I really work within the system of Davidson. And so I see myself very much in partnership with our senior leadership, our alumni, our current students, our faculty, and our staff to figure out what are we doing really, really well, and what are we not doing so great. One reason why I love Davidson College is because there's an openness and an eagerness to want to do better all the time, which is great. And I haven't quite met a lot of resistance to those changes. But, I think it's also hard to convince our campus that there need to be changes, right? The hard part of my work also is that our students sometimes want things yesterday, and that's sometimes not as quick to do. And so it's kind of my work in the middle to be a balance, a mediator, to work with looking at policies, our structures, and even our funding to see how we can equitably support our students. So to me, with the book of Caste, it's another framework in how we kind of can think about and do this work and have these deeper conversations to ultimately serve our students the best. And I argue serve our town the best as well. So is that enough time for you, Beth? Want me to keep going?
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And I think it helps sort of establish a little bit of a framework for our first breakout room question, which is a homework assignment that we were given at the last session, which is to really think about our spheres of influence. And so in just a moment, you're going to get an invitation to a breakout room. And this is thinking about the systems that you are a part of, the organizations, the spheres which start with our own selves and our own families and go outward from there. So where do you feel like you have a voice? And this is a chance to just share with your group, and that will be your group throughout the evening, what you feel like your spheres of influence are at the moment. And then later in the evening, we'll talk a little bit about things that we can actively do within those spheres to respond to the call to action. So I'm going to open up the rooms here. And when we come back, we're going to have a really awesome conversation between Dean Domain and Brandon. And the very last second, I love it. Great. Welcome back. We hope that was a fun starter and a fruitful conversation. And I'm going to turn over the reins here to Dean Domain to talk to Brandon a little bit about his experiences and his leadership and his hopes and visions. So take it away.
Great, thank you. And so, yeah, I think I forgot to say this earlier in my intro. One of the things I love most is I get to talk to student leaders, and I love to be able to be we were joking in our prep that I like to be the Kelly or the Michelle to our students' Beyonce. So that's really important to me. The students get to have as much space as possible to share their experiences. So I'm super thrilled to be chatting with Brandon today. So the very first question I have for Brandon is for you to tell us a little bit about your story, like, what motivated you to come to Davidson, and what has your experience been like on campus so far as a student?
Yeah, I can give you a background on how I got involved with Davidson, I guess. And I just like to start out by thanking you all for having me here today. I'm really appreciative of Beth reaching out to me. We've crossed paths many times without actually crossing, so it's nice to actually establish this or have this happen today. So I'm very appreciative. Yeah, so when I was in high school, junior year, senior year, thinking about where to apply. And I was thinking that I wanted to go to a larger institution. I was not thinking the South because of various reasons. I'm from Annapolis, Maryland. Um, and I was thinking that, going to school around Maryland or in the Northeast, a larger school that was more well known in my community would be best for me. And I actually had a mentor who graduated from Davidson a while back. And every week, every time that we interacted, he would ask me, "Have you applied to Davidson yet? Have you applied to Davidson?" Ask me all the time. So it got to the point where I actually decided to apply just a few days before the deadline, just to get him to stop questioning me and pushing me in that direction. So I did, and my college counselor got a call from Davidson a few weeks after I applied, asking if I would be willing to seriously consider Davidson if they put me in the running for the Belk Scholarship, which is a full academic scholarship, tuition and room and board. So obviously, the college counselor and I had a conversation, and I said yes. I mean, we'll keep all doors open. So I got put into the running for that, and sure enough, I got invited to campus as a finalist for the scholarship, and that was the first college campus I had toured in my during high school in my search for college. And I came to Davidson, got to go to classes. I stayed here for 3 days with a host, and I realized that there's nothing wrong with a smaller institution. There's actually many benefits to going to a smaller school, especially liberal arts. And I was eventually offered the scholarship at the end of the weekend, and I decided it was the best option in terms, for money, of course, but then also academically speaking, this is a challenging school, and I wanted to be faced with some challenges in my 4 years of college. So that's how I got involved with Davidson, I guess.
Great. And so tell us a little bit about, your leadership pathway. So currently, as Beth mentioned, you are SGA president, which is huge to begin with, and then you get to do it twice. And noteworthy for you, Brandon, is that you're our second SGA Black president, following the legacy of Anthony Fox, which I think many people know Anthony Fox. Tell us about what motivated you to lead at Davidson, and let's also talk about, navigating your identities as a Black student on campus.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I joined student government when I was a junior. Actually, I tried to join as a sophomore and didn't get the votes. I tried as a junior, and I got involved as a junior, got involved as a senior in high school as well. And it was so much work. I mean, the classes, I was busy with that, and then student government as well. And then I was playing sports also. So it was very busy. And everybody who's close to me, they know that I said I would not get involved with student government or any type of leadership in college because I just wanted to focus on my grades. I knew it was going to be hard coming here, making the transition to this type of academics. So that's what I said. But then the first week or the first month of college, I saw the flyers to run for student government. And I said, why not throw my hat in the ring? There were like 30 people running for 6 positions. And I did throw my hat in the ring. And I guess like a mindset that I've come to adopt is that if I put myself in a position to run for something, that's not just student government, that goes for anything, any event that I'm involved in. I want to know that I put my all into it when I have the opportunity. So what I did was I actually knocked on every single freshman dorm to campaign and let each freshman know why I thought I was a good choice in the voting. And I got elected president of the class after doing that. So I did that for 2 years, and there were some problems that I've noticed at Davidson in my first year and a half here. And as a sophomore, I felt that I knew enough information or enough about the college to run for this type of position, student body president. But I also knew that I had the right people around me to support me in that type of decision. So if there weren't things I knew about how the college operated, I knew that I had people in my corner who could help me understand. So I decided to run for student body president as a sophomore, and I got elected, and that's how I got involved. It's been interesting trying to navigate the position as a Black male at Davidson, since I am an overwhelmingly, I guess, like underwhelmingly represented student on campus. There are many things that I have gone through here that I felt that I can't talk about. There's problems that I'd like to address, but I'm careful in addressing them for many reasons. One, you never want to come across as the angry Black man. You don't want to perpetuate that stereotype. So in the beginning, especially, I had a very tough time. I had many moral conflicts going on in my mind about whether or not I should address something or not, and how I should address it. Because as any human would be, if they feel that they are discriminated or someone they know is discriminated against in any type of way, you become angry. Your emotions get to you. But knowing how to navigate those emotions can be difficult in this type of role, because if I speak from emotion, I can automatically be written off as someone who is emotionally charged or someone who is in control of their anger. So I guess that's something that I've been trying to navigate since being in the position. And I feel that I've gotten pretty good at navigating it during the past 2 years, especially over the past year.
Great, thank you. So in terms of campus, like what do you think are some major things going on campus right now that SGA is working on in terms of race, or kind of those kind of, what are the major issues that our students are kind of advocating for and navigating on campus to improve?
Yeah, I would say that we've been focusing a lot on socioeconomic disadvantages right now, because COVID sort of exacerbated those issues with many people, people's families losing jobs and becoming less able to afford the tuition or textbooks or room and board here at Davidson. So with COVID happening, that kind of opened the door for those types of opportunities. For example, we started a textbook program here about a year ago, in the beginning of the fall semester, so in August, where we made it possible for any student who is financially challenged, made it possible for them to get access to free textbooks, unlimited amount, however many they need for their classes, whichever book it may be. So we made that possible. In terms of race, one issue that many students are concerned about right now, one is there's a push to have an Asian American department, or a department on campus that would focus on Asian American issues, an academic department. So that's something that, we've been trying to push. It's, these types of initiatives are slow moving, so they're frustrating sometimes. I mean, I would say that we have made progress as students on that mission, but not as much as we'd like to see right now. One thing that I'm really focused on, and many others in student government, is Davidson's recruitment efforts. If you research the way that Davidson advertises their school, they make much more. They have an intention to try to get more students from elite private institutions across the country and around the globe. They do that more than they do attend underrepresented communities in the US. For example, I did some research last semester, just personal research, on my home state of Maryland to see where Davidson was recruiting students, where Davidson was actively recruiting students. This means going to the school and advertising Davidson's existence. In Maryland, from October to January 1st, 8 schools were visited in Maryland, 6 of which were private, top-level elite institutions in Baltimore and DC suburbs. 2 were public schools in Montgomery County, Maryland, which, if you all know Maryland, Montgomery County is one of the wealthiest counties in the United States. these two public schools were some of the most privileged public schools in the United States as well. So recognizing these types of issues, and we've been trying, or I guess one of my goals and other people's goals is to push for Davidson to look beyond those schools into Baltimore City, Annapolis, where I'm from, inner city Washington, D.C., even Charlotte. I mean, Davidson could do better recruiting underrepresented students in Charlotte. So that's something we've been focused on as well.
Awesome. And what you're highlighting a lot is like the ways in which there's these kind of pipeline, kind of always ways of being the kind of funnel, select students to a campus like Davidson. And I know that when we talked off camera, you told us about a story about, one of your childhood friends and how you would have very similar stories and how they diverged. You want to talk a little bit more about kind of, that divergence, but also kind of how you work to do racial justice beyond Davidson? Yeah,
I can. So I grew up with a friend. Annapolis is a city. Some would say it's the capital of Maryland. It is smaller than Baltimore and DC, but the issues that happen that you notice in DC and Baltimore can be seen on a smaller scale in Annapolis. So there's segregation in Annapolis, many public housing communities where Black youth are financially challenged, living through poverty. And I had the opportunity, I grew up in a middle-class family, but since the city was so small, I went to school with many kids from public housing. We became friends as we came up. We went to elementary, middle school together. And there's this one friend who's an example. There's many others like him. I'll show you a picture of him. His name is Surah. I keep a picture on my desk. His name is Surah. This is him right here. And this is his prison ID. He's the same age as me. He mailed this to me because he wants me to keep this on my desk, to remember him. But he is my age, but in prison. Now, he's not someone who enjoys engaging with crime or whatever. He is an example of someone, a Black male in this country, who did not have the support, opportunity, and resources necessary to achieve his dreams. He wanted to go to college just like I did. Now I'm here and he's in prison at the same age. So I'm actually working on a research project right now with Professor Bailey to research his life story and see what led to some of the decisions that he made. And we're actually going to be doing a presentation next month here at Davidson on that story. But Surah is somebody who had the exact opposite opportunities that I had. He is unfortunately suffering the consequences of the decisions that he made. But had he had the support, opportunity, and resources necessary, he would have been able to pursue his dreams of being an actor and being involved with cinema as he wanted to do and as he still wants to do once he is released. So there's that dichotomy there. And it's very important to notice that this is an issue across the United States and many urban communities.
Thank you. So thinking about, we're ending the semester at Davidson in the matter of a month or so. And, you're also having an opportunity to talk to the entire, well, not the entire, but like a lot of the town folks that are here. What gives you hope about the future around a lot of the issues that you talked about? And then what parting words did you give to this audience you have right here to let them know of what would you want them to do? What is that you would want them to leave with in this moment when you have an opportunity to share that with them?
Yeah, I do have optimism in the future. I'm hopeful that things will get better for minorities like me, people who have been discriminated against for a very long time, who are continually discriminated against. I mean, many of you have probably seen the George Floyd trial that's happening right now. We can see that someone who was killed by a police officer is having his name smeared, or people are attempting to smear his name for something that is totally not connected to the actual issue, which is him being killed. So we see that, but I do have optimism in our future. Obviously, we have many good people on the call tonight. We have a lot of great people on campus, a lot of young leaders who are coming up to stand up against these issues. And as you can see, I mean, we're seeing positive change happen in very small steps. We see what happened in Georgia during the November elections after there were many attempts to make voting more difficult for poor communities. So we see that, and I'm just optimistic that I think that good always wins, and I see a lot of good, and it seems like we could be on the road to something great someday. It's going to take time and effort to fix some of these societal issues, but I do think that our systems can change.
Well, thank you so much, Brandon, for sharing your story with us and, you know, giving us some insights about campus and just also giving us a little bit of hope at a time where it feels really, really heavy. So thank you for doing that for us.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass it back to Beth.
Thank you both so much. And yes, Brandon, I'm so glad that our circles have overlapped in such ways that allowed us to connect for this event. I really appreciate your being here. I wanted to highlight someone else who's in the room tonight, who is one of the people, like Brandon said, who's doing the work day to day. And he's relatively new to our town, but an important figure, and that is Eugene Bradley. Eugene, are you here?
I am.
Yes, hello. Welcome, Eugene. I was really thrilled to first meet Eugene on Tuesday night at the Davidson's Deliberative Citizens Initiative, where he spoke on a panel about housing, which is, you know, a prime example of an issue that is completely enmeshed in issues of caste, historically and at the present moment. But I wanted to briefly introduce Eugene. He comes to our town after most recently serving as the City of Charlotte's Aviation Department Community Affairs Manager. There he was responsible for increasing Charlotte's airport presence and creating partnerships with the surrounding businesses, neighborhoods, and community organizations. He has over 16 years of public sector planning and implementation experience. And he specializes in fields of neighborhood revitalization, community development, placemaking, and land use planning. So we are grateful to have his expertise here. Since 2008, he's been with the City of Charlotte, including 12 years with the Charlotte Department of Housing and Neighborhood Services as a community engagement manager, focusing especially on community engagement, housing, and plan implementation. So he's been recently hired by the town as the Housing and Equity Director. And we invited him to join us tonight to just talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that are happening in town that you all might be able to learn more about and get involved with.
Great. Beth, thank you for that. Again, good evening, everyone. Eugene Bradley, thank you for that intro. One of the reasons why I'm here has been a really huge commitment from the town of Davidson, which is unique within itself. I think prior to me coming, there was a lot of activity around kind of the affordable housing and kind of some of the historical significance that they've already started, you know, starting back in the early 2000s up to now, and also really addressing just equity across the board, and particularly racial equity. These are things that was well discussed even before the George Floyd killing. And so a lot of work has been done between now and then, and I was recently hired in October. And so since then, just been trying to hit the ground running. And so have several kind of initiatives that we're kind of undertaking at this point. One of which was we actually established a housing equity board. And this is an advisory board similar to kind of your planning commissions types of boards. And this is really an advisory board. And as we look at a lot of different things, affordable housing, we're in the midst of developing affordable housing plan and hired a consultant. So maybe to kind of vet those things with this board, but also address equity across the city. And that has a lot of tentacles on really looking at how we do business as a town, and also how our partners do that, and how do we can influence them, and as well as ourselves to make better decisions when it comes to equity, having a real lens on that. And how do we push forward kind of everything we've been essentially talking about tonight is how do we move forward in that space of equity and knowing a lot of the history. One of the big things that we are doing today is training. Quite honestly, I think everything that we talk about tonight or in previous nights is really about education and really helping people understand who we are as a country. I think a lot of times our history books don't do a great job of telling that history. And I think we have opportunities to really help folks understand the opportunity, well, kind of where we've come from and how we got to where we are now, and how that's affected a lot of different segments of our population. And so I think that's one of the things that we feel that's important. So we have kind of a training platform that we do with our employees, but also starting with our boards and commissions. A lot of our leadership have started to attend trainings, and it's really starting to get that baseline of understanding of kind of how we got to where we are. And then taking that next level of looking at our policies of how we can influence those to make things more equitable across the board. And so there's a lot of effort in those spaces. A lot of that work started even before I came. And so really trying to build on that. So we're excited about all of those things. All the things that we also are kind of working on is really history and really specific to Davidson and some segments of the community as well. And maybe to kind of identify those historical significant people that have lived here for a very long time and their families, and really understanding kind of their story. I think one of the things is great about history is that you can start to personalize it when you actually have names and faces, and you're able to look on people's family trees and understand the significance of folks. And that's something that we're working on with folks in the West Davidson community to be able to tell their story. The college obviously is doing a lot of work in that space and really kind of digging up some tough issues. And I think that's always a good thing. And these types of platforms are just key in general for dialogue and the conversation. And so we're excited about kind of where we are in the world at this point. A lot of changes has happened in the town of Davidson, leadership changes and all that. And I think we're progressing in a great direction. This is something that we want to be able to get right, and not only to get right for the town, but also be able to be an example for other communities across the state, and then hopefully across the country, of saying, hey, this is how this community got things right. It took a lot of partnerships. It took, the public sector, the private sector, not-for-profits, the schools, universities, like all of those folks played a role in how we got this thing right. And so that's what I'm excited about, to continue that work and move those things forward. And so that's kind of a quick synopsis of things that we're working on. The really kind of keys is really addressing affordable housing, but also starting to train folks on racial equity and how governments play a role in that, and helping folks to understand that, but also looking at history and how do we incorporate that really into the built environment. And so folks are in a space, they understand who lived there and why this is a special place. So being able to tell those stories in conjunction with everything that we're talking about is going to be crucial, and hope you'll be able to see those things in the near future.
Thank you so much, Eugene. And you're so right. The power of storytelling and capturing and personalizing some of these issues really does impact people in a significant way. I posted in the chat a minute ago about the storytelling project that Brandon is currently working on, and it is an event that's open to the public. So if anyone who's here on this call tonight is compelled by the storytelling that he's doing, telling these unheard stories, I encourage you to check out that link and join us then. And likewise, the town is having lots of opportunity to engage. And so this is front of mind for the town. It's front of mind for a lot of the businesses in the town, and for obviously a lot of citizens in the town. So please just keep your radar up and be on the lookout for opportunities to lend your voice to those conversations. Thank you so much, Eugene.
Thank you.
We are going to enter our final breakout rooms for the night, and this this event is called a call to action. And so we really would love for you all to leave this particular evening with a real clear sense of one small thing or two small things that you can do to make a difference. And so the final chapter of Wilkerson's book doesn't really give us much direction, except that she says, with our current ruptures, it is not enough to not be racist or sexist. Our times call for being pro-African American, pro-woman, pro-Latino, pro-Asian, pro-Indigenous, pro-humanity, and all its manifestations. So for our final breakout room discussion, I'd like for you all to think about and consider and discuss within your spheres of influence, what are concrete ways that you can be pro-humanity? How can you put that lens on the way that you interact with those spaces and those people in those communities in a way that is fully on the side of humanity in all its manifestations? We're going to have a longer breakout room this time. We're going to go for about 25 minutes, and then we're going to reconvene and share some of those. So if each breakout room could also designate a speaker to sort of share some of your ideas with the group when we reconvene, that would be awesome. Before we start the breakout rooms, I want to give a big thank you again to Dr. Domain, to Brandon, and to Eugene Bradley for being here with us tonight. Thank you all so much for sharing a little bit about the work that you're doing. And we're so grateful for everything you're doing day in and day out to fight for racial justice and equity. All right, here go your breakout rooms again, and we'll
of more equitable policy, getting involved that way. One person talked about Ibram Kendi's idea that you need to start by telling yourself a different story, and then you need to share that different story with other people. One person volunteered the River Run community space for an event of some kind. I'm going to be letting the town know about that. In general, I'd say we had some conversation about the book, and that while people appreciated the storytelling that the author incorporated into the nonfiction aspect of the story, that it was very painful reading for some people and made them very reflective on their own lives and how perhaps ignorant they were growing up, and that they're working hard within their families and their friends and their other spheres to be influential conversationally, so that they can impact those around them. And mentioned in particular that changing people's hearts is oftentimes the hardest thing to do. So those are just some of the highlights.
Thank you, Wendy.
Yep.
I echo that notion that sometimes our sphere of our family and extended family is the hardest, or maybe the most painful place to disentangle some of this, but often the most important work we can do. Room 2. Carmen, I know that was your room. Do you have a?
I can talk. I just hate to be the one to talk. Since, I'm part of the committee, I thought, Mary, do you want to talk? No? Okay. So we didn't actually pick somebody to be a spokesperson. We just sort of had a conversation, so I do apologize. But I would say that we, much like what Wendy was saying in her group, we could have probably had the same group for the things, voting. Mary was telling us about District 206, the Democrats, and how they have these committees that they're starting that are really trying to focus on very specific things, and which I think is amazing. Kathy is part of Unity and Community, which is another organization that is getting out there in the community and getting their voice heard. And I was saying, you know, just being a voice and speaking up and not being afraid to say anything. I know, like listening to Brandon, I felt very similar to that, Brandon. I feel that when you want to, I don't want to be the crazy Puerto Rican girl, you know, when I want to speak up. So I really understood that and felt that. And so I know that for myself, I'm speaking up. But my thing was just asking our group to also speak up. I think that, I mean, that was it, because the rest was us just talking about, oh, you know what Orly really said was to listen. And that really, being a good listener. And I think that was really important, that everybody's story, we all have a story, and everybody's story is important, and everybody's voice is important, and we need to listen to that. Yeah, it was beautiful. So thanks to my group for being there and listening to me. And I hope I listened to you as well. So, but if you guys have anything else you want to throw in, please feel free.
I want to throw in what Liz said, which was the impact you have on being kind and sharing your space and your home with people that maybe don't have what you have. And she gave Brandon credit for all that. But, you know, the impact you can have by those smaller things, even hanging in a book club that doesn't like to read challenging things like Caste, and making a dent, as we put it, in people's attitudes. Yeah.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you both. That was a lovely recap. Room 3. Do you all have somebody willing to share?
I can share unless somebody else in our group wants to share. We also forgot to pick somebody to be our scribe. Okay, so in our group, we have lots of activism in the form of, you know, sort of grassroots initiatives, actual life's work, book clubs, a book club that's dedicated to having its membership make up 50% white and 50% Black, and just always keeping the hard conversations at the forefront, even though they span a political spectrum and don't always come to the table or even leave the table on the same page, but they're talking, understanding our history, understanding that lots of people who may feel like they're on different ends of the political spectrum, which is also often the racial spectrum, would find that they are really after the same things, but, you know, sort of grasping for whiteness as the thing that's, you know, going to pull them up. And if you don't have whiteness to grasp onto, then you're, you know, potentially left behind. And so that captures a lot of what people were doing. And we also just had a great conversation about Davidson and connecting to the book some, and I appreciated our group a lot. Thank you all. Oh, and then, let me just add to looking at groups, the groups that we're involved with that are predominantly white, and really trying to parse out why they're white and to really better understand how exclusion may be happening unintentionally.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Ada. And that makes me realize, since I know you were talking about Mosaic Book Club, and I see Venitra is here. Hi, Venitra. If any of you is a part of an organization that you would like for the folks who've come to these events, we're going to send out a recap to all of the registrants from all 3 events. And so if you would like for us to share a link to something that you have going on that they could learn more about and potentially even get involved in, please just feel free. Carmen, is it okay if that comes to you? You could respond to the email that came from Carmen and email Carmen. the name of your organization or just information about it, or just even just a link, and we'll try to compile a list of those local resources for folks as a way to continue to stay involved. So group 4.
We didn't actually pick a leader either, but I took some notes, so I'm happy to share. And then the rest of you, if you'd like to chime in, feel free. Our group talked about slowly educating our family members if they have different perspectives than we do, and starting there and just sort of working the dialogue that way. Other people shared some really concrete examples of what they're doing. In fact, Kathy shared about Opera Carolina and a program that they're spearheading to bring groups together through the gift of music and discussion, and offered to link up any groups that we might have, book clubs, whatever, related to Davidson, get tapped into the Opera Carolina program for that discussion. Brandon talked about the group of students he's taking to Puerto Rico in more detail, which sounds like it would be a really great experience for all involved to experience a different culture. The topic of gentrification came up in West Davidson, as well as in our neighboring community of Smithville and Cornelius. And we were really interested in hearing about Eugene's work and would love to talk with him further at some point to ensure that we're capturing all of those histories, learning more about gentrification, knowing that there are different opinions related to that, et cetera, because it's just important that we're having the dialogue across the greater Lake Norman community as well. And then we spent a lot of time talking to Brandon and listening to him share the work that he's doing. So anybody else have anything that they'd like to share? We all appreciate the work that Brandon's doing, telling the story of his friend Sora, and recognizing that the opportunities that he had were different than his friends, and we're interested in the program that's coming up soon. So it's great to learn more about that.
Go ahead, Kathy. It looked like you started.
I wanted just to add that the community engagement program that Opera Carolina is doing is specifically focused this time on the I Dream opera, the story of Martin Luther King Jr.'s last days. And it's a fabulous, wonderful opera, but it certainly is one that brings to mind a lot of conversation. So that fits in with what we're talking about tonight too.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you all so much for sharing. And again, we would love to be able to sort of spread the word about some of these initiatives and the things that you're involved in. So please do send that to Carmen. As we wrap up, again, I just want to thank you for committing to this series. For those of you who stuck with us for the long haul, we are so grateful for your time and your energy. And we hope, the committee hopes that this book has helped deepen your understanding of race in America, well, caste in America. And also that you've been able to make some connections here with others, connections that inspire you to stay engaged, to step forward, and to be a part of systemic change in small and big ways. The committee itself has really tried to operate with that goal in mind this year. And so all 4 of our selections this year were chosen very intentionally as a way to promote and provoke these kind of conversations. We really hope that you'll consider joining us for 3 more events this month. The first is on April 17th. We're hosting Alicia D. Williams, who wrote this beautiful book, Genesis Begins Again. It's a middle grades coming of age story that addresses colorism and housing insecurity. It's a really wonderful way to have insight into a Black girl's experience in growing up in Detroit, and just full of possibilities for empathy and understanding. And it's just a beautiful story. She's going to be in conversation with a teacher from Davidson K-8, Robin McLennan. And then on April 29th, we have legend-born author Tracy Dion here with Dr. Hillary Green from Davidson College. And this is fascinating because this is a young adult fantasy novel but it is a retelling of King Arthurian legend, and it weaves in Southern folklore and Black girl magic. It's got a wonderful protagonist who is a 16-year-old Black girl named Bree, and it really looks at history and power and who has held those, who's written the stories of history and who's held on to the power. And it takes place at the college campus of Chapel Hill. And so we're having her in conversation with Hillary Green, who is visiting professor at Davidson, who's led the commission on looking at race and slavery at Davidson College. And she's an expert in looking at historical spaces, especially on college campuses, and was consulted for Legendborn, so actually helped Tracy down with some of the research and some of the writing she did for the book. So we're really excited about both conversations and both books, one that is a really sweet and empathetic view, and another that tackles these really big, heady issues, but with, you know, a fair amount of magic thrown in as well. And then finally, on the 24th, on Independent Bookstore Day, we are hosting the author of The Power of One. So if you have any small people in your life, this is a book that really looks at how one small act of kindness, to echo what Orly's group was talking about, what Liz said, one small act of kindness can have ripple effects that really change, can change the world. So we hope that you consider coming out for those. We'll put them in writing and send them to you in a follow-up. But lastly, on behalf of the committee, on behalf of the town of Davidson, the public library, and Main Street Books, thank you so much for being here, for reading along with us, and we hope you have a wonderful night. And feel free to unmute so you can say goodbye to your newfound friends in here.
Bye,
Thank you.
friends.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Nice to meet all of you and see
Thank you
you.
for coming.
Bye, friends. Thank you
All
all.
right, thank you.
Bye.
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 And nice to meet you, Eugene.
Faye, I wanted to hear more about the organization you were talking about. Quickly. Oh, sorry, you're muted, so I can't hear you. Good night, everybody.
But the parent company, I think, is Youth Development Institute, YDC, or YDI. The part I work with is called Step Up. And
Okay.
these are high school students. We're trying to get them comfortable in interviewing, making resumes, and getting things ready to go to college.